Ben, good morning. How do we worry about a Russia anti-satellite weapon when we don't worry about Russia invading Ukraine and getting close to our NATO allies?
Well, Hugh, I'm happy to join you this morning, but I don't know if you've mentioned it to your listeners yet. But I mean, this is a really dark day for Russia and for those who care about the future of Russia with the reported death of Alexei Navalny in prison. I don't know if you've seen it or if you can confirm now multiple legitimate sources that he passed away after collapsing. And
Adam had told me that had made it to X, but it's been confirmed.
It's all across Russian state media, and the Wall Street Journal is reporting it. But I don't know, beyond the sort of details that come out from Russian state media, I don't think they would be running with it unless it was.
No, that means he's dead. That means Putin did him in. Was it by pillow or by natural causes?
Yes. So, I mean, they have some rigmarole about he collapsed while walking. I mean, he's a few years older than me. He's not someone who, look, we should consider this an assassination. Just
sure.
As Boris Nemtsov was assassinated, and. Look, I think there's something, and I have to say this to you, Hugh, because I am a Fox contributor, but I will be on the network a couple times, including Special Report tonight, but I'm going to say it to you. There's something karmic and damning about the fact that this week we saw Tucker Carlson chortling his way through the Russian knockoff Aldi, espousing the beauties of their authoritarian empire, as someone who's actually courageous, someone who actually stands for their beliefs, is assassinated by the regime that he stood up to for decades. And it is abhorrent to me to see the way that the national populist right, with whom I have much to agree upon, has in some way fallen prey to the virtues of authoritarianism because they build public transportation systems that these people will never use, that they find beautiful and impressive, and that absolutely crush the people who helped create them. And espouse that as something that says in some way that there's an indictment of the West, an indictment of America, because our public transport systems are screwed up and we have a bunch of bums around in open-air drug markets and the like. That's a problem, and we should condemn it. But the truth is that the West has the moral authority in this on so many different areas here that they cannot use when it comes to espousing what Putin has pivoted to. And this is, by the way, one of the central aspects of Navalny's indictment of Putin that got under his skin so much, which is that he had used the pivot to sort of a Christian focus, a faith focus, to distract from his own thievery and criminal activity and extravagance. How much he has stolen from the people of Russia. And Hugh, I was a pallbearer for John McCain along with my friend Vladimir Kara-Murza. He is currently, as of 2 weeks ago, he was moved into isolation. In terms of his own imprisonment, he's been sentenced to 25 years in prison. He's my age. He has 3 kids. They've tried to poison him twice, and yet he still went back. He's realistically speaking, Hugh, and I'm not trying to be dark about this, but he's probably next on the list in terms of opposition figures who Putin just knocks off one after the other because, he has that attitude as a KGB survivor that no foe, no opponent can be allowed to exist.
We're not going to have much fun. I'm on the panel tonight, too, unless we end up doing it in studio, in which case it won't be, and we're all going to agree. Putin is an evil guy. So is Xi, who's got Jimmy Lai locked up and the Iranian mullahs. Yes. But I want to connect up Navalny being murdered, and it is murder. We've got a bill to oppose Ukraine, and I don't think I hear from some people what Johnson's going to do is attach HR2, send it back over, and continue negotiations. Okay, fine. If that doesn't work, we have to pass this. Ukraine is our ally. Russia is our enemy. I don't understand what people don't understand.
Yes. I think that it absolutely has to be, considered a situation now where we are, we have to advocate for this. And this is the thing that I think, I may have said this to you before, Hugh, but it's what is so absent from this conversation. We need to be able to have advocates who are out there pushing for the truth about this situation, the dynamics of this situation in ways that will, ultimately, I think be able to convince a lot of people. But the truth is that we don't have those advocates. And the reason we don't have those advocates in the traditional way is that Republicans who would normally be standing up and taking the side of people who are fighting and balancing against these authoritarian regimes, they're put back on their heels by the fact that they have a military and an administration policy that they don't trust. And why should they trust it? I mean, the Biden administration has been slow, and they've been on their back heels throughout this. They haven't supplied the kind of equipment, the kind of support that was needed when it could make a difference, and they really have not done the kind of things that they needed to do in order to make the case to the American people for why this is. I have not heard a rationale from the president, from the White House, for months now about.
Oh, Ben, he can't make one, right? And there's a piece by Ken Kachigian in the Wall Street Journal today, and I wrote a piece. He should resign. Ken says he won't for these reasons, which he likes the perks.
I read that piece, and Ken's a great writer. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, there's just nothing to be said. He's just hanging around, and we are paralyzed. I can't imagine him beating, even if Trump's convicted by Alvin Bragg and Jack Smith, he's still going to beat him because the guy is empty.
Well, he's not going to be convicted by Fannie Willis at this rate.
No, he's not. No, I do want to read you something serious. My friend Captain Hendricks, who is a navalist respected on both sides of the aisle, wrote me a note. If you think of the Mediterranean, literally the Romans used to call it the Middle Sea and our sea, as the motherboard, the central microprocessor chip of the modern global economic system, then we should understand that the two nodes of the processor, the Suez Canal and the Dardanelles, have been compromised and constricted. Even the Strait of Gibraltar is now under surveillance by terrorists. If the Med cannot be used for free trade, the global system will begin to break down in a cascade failure. There's shipbuilding in the bill too.
But this is the other thing. So much of what politics is, and this, is being able to make the strong case to the American people and let them decide for themselves and trusting them to make the right decision. And that, when people talk about Reaganism, that's something that's so central to it. It's absent, I think, frankly, from a lot of the things that are today. The policy posture is part of it, but leadership and statesmanship require you to make the case to the people, and there's no one out there doing that, which is why it's such a sad thing, even though it's a predictable thing, even though it's an understandable thing, that someone like Mike Gallagher is leaving Congress at the end of the year, because it's just we need more people who have the capacity to make that case, to say there are, as he says, there are worse things than recognizing that we're in a Cold War, and that's a hot war. And that's I think that we have the ability to avoid that in certain ways around the world, but we're not doing the things that we need to be doing now to prevent that.
Now, just take that a step further. We'll talk about this tonight, and maybe we'll have 3 minutes. All right. the rest of American media will be focused on Fannie Willis and her made-up case and Alvin Bragg and his made-up case. We're in a bind of our own making, Ben. We cannot focus on serious things, and I don't know how to get back. Reagan ran on national security. I don't think former President Trump is, although he made some references to it yesterday. But we ought to vote on this basis at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we have to, have a real conversation on the American right, and I mean that right writ large, about where we go from here, about what's important, what we prioritize, how we rebuild, because we do need to be rebuilding, and in a very serious and an intentional way, not just throwing money at the military. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's more about being intentional, and it's about avoiding mistakes of the past. And, of course, rebuilding the kind of authority and trust in authority that needs to be clear within that side of what we do as a country.
But if you had to pick, we got 1 minute. If you had to pick a Secretary of Defense, if Donald Trump came out and said, "Here's my running mate and here's my DOD," who would you pick for the DOD part? To do what Cap Weinberger did, to do what, or to begin? It might take 12 years. It might take 2 Republican presidents. Who would you send to DOD?
Oh, gosh, Hugh. That's a tough question. I need a reform-minded person. I mean, I obviously have an affinity for listening to Bob Gates on a lot of things, and so it's in my inclination to ask his advice as opposed to mine.
One name.
I don't know if you have someone in mind.
I do. I think it should be Mike Pompeo because he knows how to run bureaucracy.
Well, I mean, but see, this is my problem. My default answer for every position in the cabinet.
I know, but defense is first. It's first. I mean, the vice president helps you get elected and stands by, but you got to get someone to run that department that knows how to cut the people who do nothing and buy the things that win wars.